All right, so let's look at chapter 24, The World at War. We're going to look at World War II. We're going to look at mobilization and the effect on the home front and abroad. All right, so let's just begin by looking at the rise of fascism. So Japan and Italy in 1931, Japan's going to begin expanding into Asia. All right, and they're going to occupy Manchuria. All right, then Mussolini in Italy, he's going to be the leader since 1922, and he's going to invade Ethiopia in 1935. So those two countries, along with Hitler's Germany, who Hitler in 1933 becomes the chancellor, elections were then suspended, political parties were then outlawed, and rivals were arrested and or killed often. So Germany, under the Treaty of Versailles, remember, is suffering financially. Hitler begins to ignore many of those policies under the treaty, such as the buildup of military or the Air Force. Okay. So looking at this image, all right, people hanging outside of the windows, people throwing flowers at Hitler. They saw hope. He spoke of hope, financial hope, and a brighter future of the country. So this is how he kind of wooed some people in. All right, so the Popular Front. So war basically against fascism is going to attract American intellectuals and social activists. However, we are still very isolationist politically. So in 1935, we're going to pass the Neutrality Act. This is essentially an embargo on selling arms to the warring countries. We'll make negotiations around that, but and then in 1937, we're going to pass something called the cash and carry requirement. Basically, warring countries can purchase non-military goods from the U.S. Okay, so Germany is going to annex Austria in 1938. This is failing to acknowledge the previous agreement with everybody that he would kind of chill out on taking territories. So France and Britain are going to try again. They're going to say, hey, okay, fine. You can, annex this. You can do this, but no more. And Hitler says, okay, sure. I won't do any more. And then he and Stalin are going to sign a non-aggression pact saying, let's be cordial and friendly to one another. And we will not engage in military action against one another. So appeasement with France and Britain, non-aggression pact with Stalin and the USSR, and by 1939, Hitler invades Poland, thereby breaking the appeasement act with France and Germany, or France and Britain, and so they are going to declare war on Germany. All right, so Americans, remember Lindbergh flew over the ocean, first time solo flight. He's going to urge FDR to stay out of the war. He visited Germany. He thought Hitler was just doing what was best for Germany. He thought that he was due to have an air force, so he didn't see Hitler as a threat, and he tried to persuade that to FDR. The U.S. is going to continue to trade with Britain, as we have forever. And then eventually we're going to get the Lend-Lease Act passed, which basically loans equipment to Britain, and they'll just pay for it later. So then we're going to have the Atlantic Charter. This is an agreement between FDR, and Britain that's going to call for economic collaboration, national self-determination, political stability after the war. It's basically like our assurance to Britain that we're with you, mostly minus sending troops. Okay. In 1941 December, we are going to have the attack on Pearl Harbor. Okay, so FDR was already kind of negotiating with Japan due to their invasion in China. Some of the atrocities being committed over there were the Nanjing attack, whereby 300,000 Chinese were massacred. It was a huge destruction of property. It was raping, pillaging, destroying the area. Japan's goal was to kind of pursue a greater East Asia prosperity sphere, and they wanted to be in the middle of it. It was theirs. From Korea all the way to Indonesia, that was their goal. So the U.S. froze Japanese assets and started an embargo, which means that they couldn't get oil anymore. Okay. So General Toho he's gonna become the prime minister, and he's gonna begin making plans for war. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor is gonna be bombed. 2,400 Americans are killed. Immediately upon that attack, FDR the very next day goes and addresses Congress, whereby Congress votes not unanimously, but obviously majority to declare war against Japan. By declaring war against Japan, Japan's ally, Germany, then declares war on us. So we're now in it. So the US industry is going to begin to mobilize. This is really a lot of what gets us out of the Great Depression, because all of these businesses that were no longer in existence because we no longer had the money to buy these luxuries, these factories were going to be turned into war production industries. All right, so as you can see, we have the non-defense spending and the defense spending, and as soon as World War II happens, defense spending spikes up big time. All right, so more than 15 million men and women are going to enlist. Okay, millions of civilians are going to mobilize into the workplaces, and almost 1 million African Americans, though segregated, while Native and Mexican Americans were not segregated, they're going to join the military. This is where you do get the Navajo Code, the idea that our secret code was built off of the Navajo language, and was actually never broken throughout the war. So when we look at women, we have over 350,000 women that enlisted, serving in different branches of the military as administrative assistants, nurses, and some other different positions. We have 140,000 who are going to join the Women's Army Corps, 100,000 who are going to join women accepted for volunteer emergency service, which is basically the Navy. Okay, so on the home front, remember, right, we have the call to women to come join the workplace to build and work inside of the defense industry, and this is going to be Rosie the Riveter. Okay, the call to housewives, it's their duty to come out and help their men. So by 1945, women made up 36% of the labor force. Okay, never before have we ever seen that number. They are going to experience wage discrimination, sexual harassment, a tough time, but in our hearts, right, we're doing it for a good cause. So wartime civil rights. The idea is that if we're going to fight Nazism abroad, we should do something about racism at home. And there's going to be this person, A. Philip Randolph. He's going to head the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, and he's going to plan a march on Washington. FDR is going to issue an executive order prohibiting discrimination in defense industry and government jobs. That's going to appease Randolph, and he's not going to have the March on Washington. We'll have that in the 1960s with MLK. All right, so we're going to organize labor. National War Labor Board sets wages, hours, and conditions. Union membership increases. Women are out on the field, and they get to be a part of these unions. All right, in 1944, in a State of the Union, FDR is going to call for guaranteeing Americans access to education, jobs, food, clothing, and medical access. This is going to result into the GI Bill of Rights. On Election Day of 1944, the Democratic Party replaced Vice President Henry Wallace with Harry Truman. So Harry Truman is going to be the VP once FDR gets elected to his next term. All right. So we're going to have the Office of War Information at home. This is going to encourage linking all consumer products with the war effort. Okay, so we need to ration, we need to regulate so we don't drive cars. We really watch how much meat and butter and sugar we eat. This is, of course, going to lead to a black market because that is how we handle anybody telling us to ration our goods. But we are going to supply the soldiers. All right, this is leading to the Second Great Migration. Okay, there is going to be intense competition for jobs. This is going to increase racial tensions, and we are going to have more racial riots during this time. One of those is the Zoot Suits riots in LA. So this is where a bunch of servicemen, along with off-duty police, are going to attack a bunch of young Latinos in the summer of 1943. These Latinos were viewed as thugs and draft dodgers, even though the majority of them were actually too young to serve in the military, leading to large-scale riots. Seen today more as just a racial riot against Mexican Americans. During that time, though, it was seen as patriotic because they were draft dodgers. So All right, and then we're going to have the gay and lesbian communities. Most are going to keep silent due to the hostilities and threats of jobs that are going to come from this, but large city developments like neighborhoods are going to come into effect during this time and later fuel the gay rights movement of the 60s and 70s. And then we have the Japanese removal. So we're going to have the anti-Asian sentiment. So the idea is once we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, we need to do something about the Japanese population because we don't trust them. So FDR is going to issue Executive Order 9066. This is one that you need to know, remember, and have in your notes. This is going to gather up all Japanese Americans and Japanese, and we're going to relocate them to camps. All right. Now, there are going to be lawsuits against this. Okay. But the Supreme Court is going to rule that this internment is legal. So that's kind of a big deal. All right. Later, Congress is going to say maybe that was in poor choice. So we're going to award $20,000 to survivors in 1988 with an apology. Here are where some of the camps were located. So Colorado, we had a camp. All right. Manzanar is one of the more famous camps. Okay. So keep those in mind. All right. So then we're going to get the big three. Okay. So FDR, Churchill, and Stalin are all going to work together to try to crush Germany. All right. And Japan. Okay. This is going to lead to different negotiations with them. So let's just look at the Battle of Kursk really quick. British opposed invasion in the 1942. Eventually, they would say, fine, Soviets are going to have 860,000 casualties. The big three are going to open up the second front in 1944 with the Battle of Stalingrad, where they stop German advancement into the USSR. And then eventually, the Allies are going to be coming up North Africa, and we're going to cross over into Italy and take Rome in 1944. All right, in 1944, summer, we're going to have D-Day. Okay, this is the invasion of France led by Eisenhower. Remember his name. This is going to be huge casualties, but does lead to the liberation of Paris, which was a really big, important strategy. So then we're also going to have the bombing of Hamburg and Dresden, which is going to kill 305,000+ civilians and soldiers in Germany. Germans are going to attempt an offensive at the Battle of Bulge, but they're going to lose, at which point Hitler is going to kill himself and his wife/girlfriend, whichever version of history you agree with, in 1945. Following quite shortly after April 30th, Germany is going to surrender on May 7th of 1945, which is going to give us European victory. Okay, so we'll have EV Day at that point. Okay, so also something to remember, right, that Germany had the Holocaust, which was the idea that we are going to have these extermination camps where 6 million Jews and Poles and Slavs, Gypsies, homosexuals, quote unquote undesirables are going to be killed. Once we invade and we take Germany and we liberate these camps, the circulation of images are going to shock the world. All right. And we are going to have to deal with the fact that we did have some anti-Semitism in the U.S., which did kind of prevent us from helping Jewish refugees who were trying to escape the Holocaust. So here are some of the images that get shared. Okay, so let's look at the Pacific. All right, through 1942, mid-1942, U.S. Navy is going to suffer a bunch of losses. We're going to have to surrender the Philippines. There's going to be something called the Bataan Death March, which is going to kill 10,000 American POWs. There's going to be the battles at Coral Sea and Midway. All right, these are going to be victories for us. The death tolls at Iwo Jima and Okinawa were pretty severe, but resulted in strong victories for us. All right, so meanwhile at home, we have the Manhattan Project, where Oppenheimer is the scientist leading the production of the atomic chain reaction. Okay, so We believe that Germany is also working on this bomb, so we are kind of putting a rush on this. It's going to cost $2 billion. 120,000 people are going to be employed in this, and pretty much none of them know what they're actually working on. It's hidden from everybody until tested on July 16th of 1945. All right, so the Yalta Conference, super important for you to know and remember. This is going to be the final meeting with FDR in attendance because he's going to die shortly after this. They're going to discuss treatment of Germany. They're going to discuss Poland and what to do there. They're going to agree to create the United Nations here, right? And Russia is going to agree to help the U.S. in the Pacific War. They don't really ever do anything, but they agree to do it. All right, so how we're going to handle the Pacific War to end it is the atomic bomb. So on August 6th, Truman, FDR is now passed. Truman is the president. He finds out that we have this new weapon and he says, let's use it. So Truman is going to order the bombing of Hiroshima. All right, so Paul Tibbets, he's going to fly the Enola Gay, the plane over Hiroshima, and he's going to drop Little Boy. It's going to explode 2,000 feet above Hiroshima and destroy 5 square miles. All right, so then on August 9th, there is no word from Japan, no hint of surrender. They're not replying to our urges to communicate, so we decide to drop another bomb on Nagasaki. So pilot Charles Sweeney, he's going to fly the Boxcar over Nagasaki, and he's going to drop Fat Boy. Nagasaki is nestled between mountains in kind of a valley area, so Fat Boy is only going to destroy 2 square miles. I mean, it's a little bit better, I guess. Here are images of the devastation. So the casualties of the war are more than 50 million soldiers and civilians are going to be killed. 30 million people are going to be homeless. And the economic and political struggles are going to be with us for quite some time. So the infrastructures of Germany and Japan are pretty much ruined. Britain is no longer the main world power. We are. And African and Asian countries become determined to end colonialism. So they want to get rid of France. They want to get rid of Britain. They want to get rid of Germany, all these countries that had been colonizing them. So this is going to be quite significant when we get to Vietnam. If you look at the death tolls, the USSR suffered the most in World War II. All right, China obviously suffered huge casualties due to the Japanese invasions and destruction that they committed. All right, the US had 420,000 deaths, still rather significant. UK 500 and France 500. All right, guys, we covered a lot of stuff. There's definitely 3 major political figures you should know in here. Obviously, some sources of conflict, and definitely more than 5 key events. So update your big ideas, get these into your notes, and until next time.